last week I accidentally saw a YouTube video by Marc-Andre Hamelin, and I sent this to the faculty because it just really impressed me. And it's a great interview, and it's a YouTube channel called Living the Classical Life. So it's just amazing. And he said, to me, a performance is not an exhibition, it's an offering. Isn't that wonderful? It's not an exhibition, it's an offering. And I think so often we can get bogged down in all the details. So I shared that with my students here at Dixie, and that helped a few of them because they had a concert, and we all get nervous and all of that. And so let me just tell a couple of stories. If you've heard these, forgive me, but it just kind of is my segue into what we're going to talk about. So years ago, when I was doing doctoral studies in Kansas City, I taught for the community ed division, and I had a cute little student, and nobody will ever know who he is, but he struggled and was a beginner, and I had to spoon feed a lot, and he's the kind of student, didn't practice much and whatever and all this. And we had a festival every spring, like a lot of people do. So I thought, I'm going to get him ready, and that'll be something to work for. And it was just a little 2-liner piece out of a, level 1 or prep level. And we worked on it for several weeks. And when he went to play for the judge, I was out in the hallway, and they were in a little room with the judge. And he played his piece 10 times. And I sat there, and after the second time I thought, oh, he's repeating. And then he just kept going, which of course the piece was so short and it gave the judge time to write comments. But I realized, I thought, you know what? I've been having him practice the piece 10 times a day. And so when he went to play for the judge, he played it 10 times. And that was a huge wake-up call for me, that how am I preparing students for that experience of whatever the experience is, if they're on the stage or playing for a judge or whatever. And so I've never forgotten that, and I try to make very clear my instructions on practicing and performing, or practice performing, and how all of that goes. And so that's kind of fun. Where's my little thing? When we talk about performing, another little phrase I like is the performance space. And years ago, I had a student who, after the senior recital, said to me, and she had done tons of prep for that, and performed for family, for friends, and getting all of that. But on the night of the recital, and she did well, but she talked to me later and said, nothing could have prepared me for this, because and I said, what do you mean? And she said, she was surprised at the nerves she felt, where she had been practicing and performing in classes and performing for friends and doing run-throughs, but when it came down to the day, it just felt so different. And obviously we know that performing takes a lot of experience, and we've got to do it. And some people are more naturally inclined than others. Another experience with a very, very talented student, after her recital, she looked at me and she said, I had no idea of the mental energy that this would require. And what's interesting is she was one of those students who memorized very easily. I didn't have to dream up all of these ways to help her memorize. It just came, and she was a good practicer and all of that. But again, the mental energy when you're on that stage is pretty amazing. So then one last little example. a student of mine played the Rachmaninoff Second Concerto third movement with the Southwest Symphony many years ago, a lot of years ago. And when he was preparing that, one day he came into his lesson, he said, I've got to practice different. I'm doing all these repetitions. I've got sections and I've got all of this, and I'll go through some practice tips in a few minutes. But I sat there and looked at it, and we had the whole movement divided in phrases and sections. And then we had 4 big, large sections. We had all of that. And he just said, when I practice the way I should, I could practice half of the movement for 4 hours. And you can't do that every day. Well, you can. And so we started talking, and I asked him a lot of questions about, how he was doing this or that, the other, because we worked through all of this in the lesson. And so I put him on this little kind of a plan leading up to the performance. So we had about 3 months, and I had him we scheduled like these large sections. So that section was probably 7 or 8 pages long, large. And then we had it divided up into phrases and then in pages and things like that. And so I would say, okay, so on Monday, you're going to play the first big section for 2 hours. You're going to do small lines at a time and all the different tempos and all these practice tips. And then you're also going to do section 2, but you're going to practice a page at a time. And then you're on section 3, you're going to practice the whole big deal. And I started cycling through that and and of course, things come up, you have practice spots and all that. And by just changing things up and giving him tons of variety, all of a sudden his practice got more energized, and it was just wonderful. So that's kind of one of the things that I do when we're in that review phase, which will go in a minute. So let me do now just a little review of learning pieces. So, our goal is to perform. And by the way, if anyone has a question, just kind of, I don't know, how do we do that? Somebody raise hand, or maybe periodically I'll ask for questions. One thing I like to do with students is to kind of take a piece in phases. So the introductory phase is to study up on the piece, the composer, listen to recordings, and then watch and look at the music, see what key we're in, see what time signature, what's the form, and how is it made, what's the mood, what's the mood. And that if we're teaching a short 1-page intermediate piece, it won't take very long, but it's fun to see what happens with the students when they learn a little bit about, what is a ballade, or what is a sonatina, or that or the other, and tell them a little bit about the composer. They seem to like that. So I love to give them an introduction, and then then we sit down and learn it. And the first thing to do is sight read. And that's always it can be surprising to have a student sight read in the lesson, and then you realize, oh my goodness, we have work to do. So, but then they have some idea of what's going on, and then we launch into the very basic details. Now, you can do a lot more than fingering rhythm and notes, but that to me is absolutely essential right in the beginning, because if we've got rhythm issues, then a lot of the other things aren't going to come in with that. And my goal with a student is to get them into being able to play the piece from beginning to end. So they're doing the Arabesque by Burkmüller. When they can play that all the way through, I don't care how slow it is. In fact, I like it slow initially. Then they've got it learned. And until they can play the whole piece through, um, they're stuck in this developmental phase. I have an intermediate student right now who everything else in her life is more exciting than piano, and she and I have a really good relationship. And she had a piece, and just kind of, it was always last on her lists, and then she was learning this for the evaluation, she was learning something else, and she had a piece that was just kind of stuck. And I looked at her one day and said, you've got to be able to play this from beginning to end. And that was kind of a shocker. And she realized that she was stuck on the last page. And lo and behold, finally that next week, after all these weeks of kind of being stuck on it, that one goal, let's just play from beginning to end, it got her to the end of the piece. And then now we're working on all the other stuff. So I have found with students who kind of inhale music, or they're really driven and they love it, they're going to sail through this phase. But if they get stuck, this can help them understand we're just trying to get the basics here, and here we go. So, and then the third phase, once you get past all the basics, then launch into all the musical details, the dynamics, articulation, tempo, phrasing, ornamentation, pedaling. And it depends on the student. I don't always start the pedal right away. I had a student playing the Beethoven Sonata in C minor, Opus 10, number 1, first movement. And we're using an edition that has a little bit of pedaling in it. And I have had her not do any at all, because I'm very, very picky with Beethoven. And at the beginning of the lesson, she said, when are we going to do pedal? And I said, well, we're going to do it when we're ready. And with Beethoven, again, if you start that too soon, that things get muddy and all of that. That's just my opinion. So she wanted to try a phrase with pedaling. And so I showed her a few things. And then she proceeded to play in the lesson. She followed the pedaling that was in there meticulously. And again, this is the editor. This is not Beethoven. It's not me either. But it really tripped her up. And finally I said, okay, let's take out the pedaling and let's do these other things. And so again, on the flip side, I have students who can put pedaling in very early and they're fine. And then other students who can't. And so that's depending on the composer, and all of that is what I do. So in this perfecting stage, becoming very proficient, we're working a lot on tempo and getting all of the wonderful musical details that make a piece what it should be. And also, when I say mastery phase, that's when we're getting the short-term memory. A lot of times, in fact, most of the time, they're working on memory at the same time that they're doing all these nitty-gritty musical details. But I have found that if there's any issues with accuracy, and I'm having them memorize too soon, they memorize it incorrectly. And so I'm very careful that everything is in place before we work on the memory. And again, that's a personal thing. I had teachers who made me memorize right away from week 1, and I had other teachers who didn't care and let me choose. So there's that. And then and I love putting pieces in that last phase, the review phase. And I have found with students, and it's not hard and fast rule, but once they've performed something, I mean, a public performance 3 different times, that piece becomes part of them. It's part of their DNA, and it kind of launches into their long-term memory. And so we do that. And then taking that another step it's also nice to have a student is coming up on a little festival, and her piece wasn't quite ready, and so we pulled one out that she's actually played a couple of different times, and it came back so fast. And so once you've got something, you performed it a few times, you let it sleep, then you come back, and it's great. It's great the second time, and then it's even better the third time. And I have pieces in my repertoire that if I've performed several times, especially with breaks in between, I could play it almost at any time. So that's fun. Does anyone have any questions up to this point? All right, so let's just talk about some little practice tips, and then I also want to talk about some memory things, and so we'll just sort of go from there. And did everybody get the handout? If you were here, I would just hand you out all 5 pages, and again, we won't get to all of this, but
if they didn't get it, Nancy,
what?
I emailed it out, so if anybody doesn't have it, check your email, because I sent it out last time.
So this PowerPoint is based off of the handout. So anyway, I love, and I just teach this. I practice this way. I do lots of different tempos, and I believe in that because what I find is students, and myself included, we kind of get in a groove of what tempo we like the piece. And then you walk on the stage and our heart's beating. And so we tend to play faster. In fact, every time I listen to a solo performance, I think, wow, I played a little faster than I thought I did. So when our heart is beating, we will go faster. Or they're playing and somebody coughs, or a baby cries, or I'll tell you a story about my senior recital in a minute, what happened there. And if we have only played one tempo, our favorite performance tempo, if anything happens, it puts us in an odd place, and that's when our memory starts being odd. And so in my practice tips, I love to find all the different ways we can change it up. And so the first thing I do is at least 3 tempos. And if their pieces are of that, like into the intermediate level. In beginning students, elementary, a lot of times I'll just do 2 different tempos, but just changing it up helps them. And when I have them do it in a lesson, I can tell if they haven't done their tempo practicing, because they get all confused. And the one they don't always like is slow, and so sometimes we have to help them. Another thing we can do is to do different articulations, staccato and legato. You can add accented and things like that in there. And of course, I don't have time to go through every teeny little thing. But if you take Bach, for instance, so if you can play everything legato. It's written, 16ths, and you can change up the legato and staccato, but you can flip that. You can do lots of things. And again, by changing it up, it helps so that muscle memory is not the only thing carrying them through. You can do loud and soft. So you can say, okay, let's play both hands loud, both hands soft. You could do right hand loud, left hand soft, and vice versa. You could do one line loud and one line soft. You can just do lots of changing it up just to give them variety, and that helps, especially if they're in the review phase and they're kind of getting tired of the piece. It gives them a lot of things to think about. So any questions on that? Now I'm going to go to the next slide and then I'll come back. But rhythmic practice, I love this. And it doesn't work for every student. I don't know. Can you see that? Whoops. Let me go back. Ooh. So Graham Fitch, he has a website called Practicing the Piano, and he's from England, and he's awesome. And I've watched a lot of his videos, and he is a great teacher. And he has an article, and I've got it referenced on the handout. And he calls it On Dotted Rhythms. And and this is his chart. So just so you know, that's why I put his name here. He has all these different ways of doing rhythmic practice. And this is when you have a passage that's technically difficult, but they're even notes. And so let's just take, let me see, I'm going to get out of this and go to, let me find the Bach. I have to move. It's not coming up. Here we go. Can you see that? Hopefully. All right, let me go. All of my things are, there we go. Okay. Okay, so the Bach invention. Let's say this second line, second and third measure. So measure 4 and measure 5 and 6. The student is, whatever they're doing. It's not even. You've worked on the hands and you want it. So if we take some of what Mr. Fitch has done, he says do a kind of a dotted rhythm. So or you could do there's also, you can make like an 8th note and dot it to a triplets. You could do, you just kind of change up where the long note is. You can also do make 2 longer notes and 2 shorter notes. Or you could do, let's see. And you make the shorter notes really short. So there's just that list just has lots of things on it. I find with intermediate students, they love the long short, just the basic dotted rhythm. Or and again, by changing it up, it gives them something else to think about, and there you go. So let me get out of this. It's not letting me. Hold on. There we go. And back to this. Okay. All right. So if anyone has questions on rhythm practice, let me know. Backward practice. This, I'm a huge proponent of it. I am not a huge, this is just my opinion. In my, throughout my life, if I learn a piece backward, so I start with the last phrase and do that, and I've done that a few times, it always feels strange to me. I don't know why, and that's just me. And I've talked to lots of people who swear by this, and I do. But I learn my piece forward, and the minute it's learned, I practice it backward. And that's just my pattern. But I'm not one for learning it backward. But you have to figure out what's best for you. I love this because when you practice backward, you get every part of the piece, it gets equal treatment usually. When students start from the beginning and practice, even if they're good practicing sections, they can get tired halfway through. And so it's great to start at the end and make the end as wonderful as the beginning. The other thing you can do, if they're old enough to understand this, is you can have them, okay, this week start in the middle, or change up every day where you start. But I always love going backward, and the reason I do is that, let's say I practice section 8 and then I practice section 7, then I put those two together, then I go to section 6 and then do that, and then I do 6 and 7 together, and so on and so forth, and I just keep moving up one section. And by doing that, I have practiced every phrase with the one before and the one after, and then I'm going backward, and I love practicing like that. As I've mentioned at the beginning, I love doing different size sections. You could say do a line at a time. Most of the elementary level music, a lot of times each line is a phrase, not always, but sometimes with students it's easier to say do each line 5 times or whatever, and then do lines 1 and 2. And so I love getting down to the phrase or the small section, and then grouping them. One of the things I tell my college students is, if you had a 20-line poem, would you just say it over and over and over again until you had it learned, or would you actually chunk it? One of the things they use in the public schools for music is especially with band, they'll say, let's chunk, and they know where their little sections are, chunks. And my kids used to tell me that, and and that makes sense. But I'm always surprised, because like with my college kids here, we talk about practicing, we do all of this, and then they'll come into a lesson and I'll look at them and I'll say, are you just playing the piece through because they have a performance the next week? And they'll say, well, yeah, and I spot checked. And I said, are you doing sections? No. And they put their head down, and they know I still love them. But it's interesting that we have to remind students. And so there you go. That's that. The next thing, tunnel A or tunnel B. We all know when you have places in a piece where on the first page or in the exposition, you go to this key, and there's always a key element of, it does or it changes. And then when it comes back at the end, like if it's a sonata, it's a recapitulation, there's a spot that's different. It can be in ABA form, it can be in a minuet trio, it can be in anything you want, where one time it does it this and another time it does that. I got this idea from, I used to call it, what did I say? I used to call it fast forward and rewind, because I would have them do, if you have, let's just take the Arabesque by Burgmüller. So if you're, so the first time it goes to tinker, that's tunnel A. The second time, so what I would have students do is play the first time, those few measures, play it once, jump and play when it comes at the end, and play that one. And so you have a tunnel A and a tunnel B, and I'll mark it in the music, and that's really helpful. So it's, I had an experience several years ago. I was playing a concert in the Tabernacle. They used to have a noon recital series, and I was playing a Mozart sonata, and in the slow movement there, and they all have them, you have your tunnel A and you have your tunnel B, And so I had that all worked out. But in the first movement, and same thing, there was a tunnel A and tunnel B, but there was a spot in the development that was very similar to a spot in the exposition. And I had not, I mean, I knew every note. I could write out the piece. I practiced Handel. I do everything that I teach my students. But I was performing and I got very caught up in the music. And I was in the development section, and all of a sudden I was 2 pages earlier. And the minute it happened, I knew what had happened, but it was like, oh my, what did I just do? So I kept playing, but then I had to, and that's where I've learned anytime that happens to me, when I get really caught up in the music, and then you kind of let your ear and your muscle memory take over, but you're not focused all the way because you're sort of in the dreamy place. So then I had to think really hard as I got to the development again, and I got myself through it, but that was really interesting. And so I, as a teacher, try to write in the music and what they do, because that can happen to anybody. Years ago, Nalita True from Eastman, and she, bless her heart, God rest her soul, she just left us, but she gave a presentation at the state conference, and she talked about, and I haven't found my notes, but she talked about a concert pianist who never had any memory issues ever, like all those years. And as we get older, we know we deal with a few things. I use a little bit more music than I used to. And apparently he had a memory slip in a performance, and he was so caught off guard that he didn't know what to do. And so that's interesting. This can happen to any of us. And so tunnel A, tunnel B really, really helps. Number 9, different sections on different days and different pieces on different days. I mentioned that with my student who was playing Rachmaninoff. We talked about how to practice doing small sections on this and just changing it up as much as you can. Then they're prepared in every way. My little practice plan, this is really simple. If, let's say I have a student and they're playing that little arabesque that I just played, and we do that. And they're getting ready. They're going to play it in SUPAF or play it in a festival. So these are my instructions. I'll have them perform it straight through. Then they work on any little practice spots, and you almost don't have to tell students to work on practice spots. They will just automatically do that. But then I have them practice in sections. And in a piece that's that short, I don't have to worry about small, medium, and large sections. But in longer pieces, you do. And then after they do sections, and I'll have them do different, that's when I have them do different tempos or change up staccato, legato, and just fun things to make their practicing fun. And then at the end, I have them perform. What I see students do, and they need to perform at the end of it, let's say they've spent 20 minutes on a piece. They need to perform it at the end, because that is a reward. That is, it's just like payback. And it's like when we work with a student in a lesson, it's so nice at the end, if there's time to, all right, let's play and see what we've done. The danger in that is very often they measure their progress by that final run through or performance, where I try to help them understand that if they practice really well today, their final performance will be great, but the measuring stick is their first performance tomorrow, before they should be warmed up. And can you just sit down and play it straight through? And if I have a student in here and they're frustrated, and we all hear, Oh, I can do that at home. I can do that at home. And we've all heard that a million times in our life. And my next question is, can you do it the first time? And that's always puzzling, but usually when they think about it, they'll say, well, after I practice it and then I do it and it's great, then I come here and I can't. And so if they can do it the first time they sit down at home, then they'll have a much better success in the lesson. And so that's something to think about. So I do that final performance in the lesson and in practicing, because it's a reward, and then we know if we've made progress. But that first performance, when you first sit down, that's the real kind of the deal. That's the measuring stick. So anybody have any questions on that? All right, the next thing is how I teach students to practice when they've got to jump, or when, this is how we do the jumps, and I'm going to go to that arabesque again. I'll explain it, and then I'll see if I can pull up the music for you. One of the things, you've all heard this. You know what I'm talking about, and it should be. So we've got that. The nice thing about the way that music is written is I'm going to get out of this and pull up this music. Let's see. There we go. So here's the arabesque. If it's going to. Okay, so let me go down. Here's the end. So first thing I have them do, you've got to know what the note or group of notes is before the jump. So the jump is this chord. So you have a 5-finger minor, and then you've got a rest, not very long, and then you have up there. So what I have them do, either one or a group of notes before the jump. I'll have them play the group of notes, and then we jump up, and let me see if you can see this better. We jump up and touch the chord or the note of the jump, but we don't make any sound. So I just have them do that. And so I call that touch. That's the touch part. Then I have them do and wait a beat, and then play. That's touch and play. And after they've done that, then by jumping to the chord or the note of where that you're jumping to and touching it but not playing it first, it's like putting the brakes on. If you're driving, let's say you're driving down the street. When my kids were little, they would say, "Oh, Mom, look at that tree," or "Oh, Mom, look at that. Oh, there's a dog." And I used to joke with them and say, "I can't look, I'm driving." But so the brakes, when we put on the brakes, then we can look around and enjoy the scenery. So by touching the chord, that's like putting on the brakes, and you feel what it feels like. And there you go. And just practice touching. If sometimes if they're having a lot of problems with a spot where they've got to jump, I'll do that first step where they touch it but don't play it. I'll have them do that all week. And the next week I'll have them touch it, wait, and then play it. And then the third week, then they can play it normal. And they're probably playing it normal anyway, and that's fine. But there's something about touching a chord, waiting, and then playing it. It helps them know what to do. You can use this same technique on any, it doesn't have to be a jump, but any note that they tend to miss. So you go and you touch it. So let's see, let me, there's an E there, and a lot lot of students play a D. So I would do probably the measure before. Let's see. And then I would touch the whichever note they were struggling with and do that, and then touch and then play it. And so the rhythm goes out the window, but they will feel that. And I've had, it's amazing what can be fixed when we use that. So does anyone have questions on that?
Nancy, I have a comment. One of the things that I've observed and I've heard in different presentations, how our ear cements things. So when they, like you're saying, to make the jump and the touch, but don't play the sound, because if they hit the wrong note, that sound cements the thing. And so I love the touch, look, and then play.
Yeah. And when I first learned, thank you, Patrice. So when I first learned this technique, you think, oh, is that going to ruin their rhythm? And it doesn't. I mean, very rarely. And students they are grateful to have something that works, because otherwise they're going and they can't find it, or they go to it too fast, and that just solidifies it. And it doesn't fix it in one day. I mean, it'll be better after just a couple of minutes of doing that, but I have found that they've got to do it usually for a week or two and to really cement it in. And as you said, Patrice, their ear is, they get used to the wrong note. In fact, I read an article by Richard Chronister years ago, and he said, at what point do you kind of let things go? If let's say you've tried, I had a student who came, I don't know, sometime in the last week, and they were playing something, and we work on it every week. We work on it in the lesson. I've had them circle it, or you do colors, you do whatever you want, and they just have the hardest time fixing it. And Richard Chronister said in his article, he said sometimes they learn something wrong in those first couple weeks, and no matter what you do, it doesn't fix all the way. It like comes back to haunt you. I've had students who have a piece so brilliant and all of this, and something that they had a problem with in the first few weeks will haunt them on the stage. And I've had that happen to myself. So that's a testament to learning things correctly right from the beginning. So we can do that. Any other comments or questions on the jump stuff? Anyway, and again, I love using that not just for jumps, but also for just problem notes.
Dr. Allred, I had
yes.
a comment, I guess.
Yeah, I'd love to hear it.
The touch and play is excellent, and I use it all the time with my students. Another thing that I was taught was to compare it to notes that you've already played, and that arabesque is a perfect example, because as you're going down that 5-finger scale, the right hand is already where the left hand is going to go, right? And so we can use that as we're touching and playing. We can use that by feel to get there, and then you can focus more on where the right hand's going.
Yeah.
And so looking for common notes can be very, very helpful. When jumping, it actually makes it feel less like a jump.
Yes. Wow.
Yes.
Yeah. And that's that's wonderful, because if their left hand is secure and the right hand, because the right hand's in the 5-finger, but then it has to increase to the 6th on the final chord, and so they can worry about that. So thank you. Awesome. Any other comments or suggestions? Now, my last one on this: slow down the tempo to achieve accuracy, complete accuracy, and then increase it. And I read an article way back, and the author said, we have to go surprisingly slow. On the flip side, if we don't start moving things and getting the tempo up when we're able, we can go too slow. I know way back in my college years, I was playing Rachmaninoff, and I realized that I hadn't spent enough time on a faster tempo. And I remember one lesson, my Dr. Polite was just pushing me to go faster. And I thought, oh, I've been working so hard on making sure it was perfect all along the way that I was quite a bit under tempo. So I had to work on that. So you do have to increase the tempo when you're ready. So I'm going to probably what we have time for, there's the rhythm thing. I've showed this. There we go. I use two methods, if you will, to help. And I use a lot more than this, but this is just to help students to get faster. One is, I've been referring to this, we have to start at a slower tempo, get it accurate, and that's a big deal. And I also love the word, can you play it easily? Because if they're playing it and it's still difficult and labored in their fingers, then they're not ready to move it up, so that's one of the things I'll say. On a scale of 1 to 10, is it easy yet? No, it's still, and the student, they know. And anyway, so I have students, we will find, and I help them find, what is that slow, accurate tempo. Sometimes we use the word perfect, but sometimes in our society, I don't know if we need to abolish that word or not, but accurate is a great word. So let's say we're slowing down and we've got the piece at 80 on the metronome, and then we move up a notch. And by a notch, I mean the ones on the good old metronomes. You probably can't see this, but 80, 84, 88. If most students now have digital metronomes, I don't like moving up by one. So if they have a digital, I'll say, well, let's do 80, 85, 90. You can do that, or I'll do by fours. And the reason is, when you go 80 to 81, and this is my opinion, there's hardly any difference. But when you do 80 to 85 or 84, there is a little bit of a difference, and they can feel that, and that's good for them. So I'll show you kind of a little chart, which is on the handout. Let's say you have it at 80, you feel good, you move it up, but it falls apart. Then you need to go back down to 80 and do that again. Try again the next day. So, okay, I've got 84. Now 84 is pretty good. It's easy, it's accurate. So let's go to 88. 88's good. Okay, all right. Then we go to 92, it falls apart, or it's just a lot of mistakes. So if you move it up, this is me. If you move it up and it falls apart, then you need to go back down to the one that's comfortable and easy. And because if you move it up and it falls apart, but they keep doing it and it's too fast for where they are, it's not gonna, most students can't get it that much better at the faster tempo. And so it's almost can be a relief. And again, let me show you this little, that's just a scenario. Now this might take several weeks of 80, 84, 88. Oh, I got to go back down to 84, get that. So very often, this could be, again, several weeks by the time they are at 80, and then they can achieve 100. But that's just sort of what might happen. What I love to do is many, many, many years ago, I had a student who came in and said, I cannot get this section up to tempo. Like, he had everything, one section, the most technical, I just can't do it. And he'd been doing faithful with the metronome. I can't do it. And so I had him, I call it sudden leaps to performance tempo. So let me just explain this. So we'll just use 80, getting up to 100. So he was stuck at 80. The rest of the piece was 100, and he was just beside himself. So practice 80, go to 84, then get brave and flip it up to your performance tempo at 100. And it's probably going to be terrible. Like he said, he just couldn't get it. Lots of mistakes, it fell apart. Okay, but there is something that happens by just trying it. And so then you go back and you say, well, I achieved 80 and 84. Those are good. So I'm going to try 88. And 88 was a little problematic, but not too bad. So, but it's still not accurate. So then go back to the 84. I got that. I'm showing myself I've got it. Okay, all right. Now I'm going to flip up to 100 again just to see. And it's actually fun, especially for students who love to play fast, because I make them stay at that more moderate tempo, and then we flip it up, and it's not very good. But what you find is every time you flip up to 100 in between gradually moving it up, the fast, that performance tempo gets a little better each time. And it is amazing. And I did this with this college student, and he was blown away. He was like, I can't believe it, this actually works. And so I helped him move up, I don't know, 3 or 4 notches on the metronome right in the lesson. So he went home, and that's exactly what he needed. So I believe in going up gradually, but there is something that happens when you flip it up to performance tempo in between going, gradually. So I love that technique. Has anyone done anything similar to that? I'm sure many of you have.
Nancy, I'm just going to let you know we have about a 2-minute warning.
Okay. I told you I could go on, and I know I'm talking fast.
That's great.
That on the handout, a group I'm in on Facebook, people were sharing tons of ideas on memorizing, and I could go 20 minutes on some of these, but and I've talked about some of this, but I love, let me see, where is it? Oh, look at number 5. Use the app, the random number generator, to mix up your sections so you can test yourself. I believe in practicing backward, and I do all of this in small, medium, large sections. But when you have your small sections, and I have a student right now who's doing it, he wrote numbers on a paper and put them in a little thing, and he pulls the number out, then he looks on his knees, I have to play section 4 and do that. And we kind of make it a game so that they can look at the section, but then they have to turn the music around and play it. And so you could go another step farther and say they've got to memorize their sections, but there you are. So I love that. The students around here like to do that. One of the thing, Scott Holden, I think it was last year, he had a little video, and he was saying, can you play like the right hand with one finger? So if you're doing, so you're actually just doing one finger, and then do the left hand with one finger. The other, and I know we've got to stop, but sometimes you play the left hand part with your right hand, play the right hand part with your left hand. So you guys can look at that. So that's it. And I'm sorry I went fast through this, but any questions?
I think you've done great. You have covered so much.
So much.
Thank you, Nancy.
Yeah.
Nancy, it was enjoyable and effective, I thought.
And I would just remind everybody to be sure and get the handout, print out the handout, and there's like 5 pages to it. There is so much good information on there. And I found my favorite quote, Nancy. It is important to practice at the speed of no mistakes. That's going on my wall.
Yep, it's wonderful.
Not at the speed of thought. Huh?
There you go.